The evening was supposed to be like any other, peaceful and uneventful. Lila had been preparing dinner for the family, humming quietly as she chopped vegetables and set the table. The warm scent of garlic and herbs filled the air, the sound of her son Nathan laughing from the backyard drifting through the open kitchen window. It was the kind of night that felt ordinary, almost comforting, until everything changed in an instant. Her eyes caught Owen's phone on the counter, discarded carelessly after a long day at work. He had been acting distant recently, a subtle shift in his behavior that Lila had chalked up to the stress of his job. But tonight, something in her gut told her that this moment, this seemingly insignificant moment, was different. Her fingers hovered over the phone, a strange sense of urgency pressing on her chest. She knew she shouldn't snoop, knew it was wrong, but the instinct to know, to confront the nagging doubt that had been building for weeks, was overwhelming. With a quick, steady breath, she picked up the phone. The screen lit up, and for a moment, Lila hesitated. Her heart raced, her hands suddenly trembling. Then, with a flick of her thumb, the messages opened. She could feel the blood drain from her face as she read the words that would shatter her life. "Can't wait to see you tonight, babe," one message read. "I've got a surprise planned. You'll love it." Lila's stomach lurched. Her hands grew clammy, and she felt a cold rush sweep over her. For a split second, time seemed to stop. Owen, her husband of 12 years, the man she trusted with her heart, had been hiding a world she never knew existed. A world with Jenna, a name she didn't recognize, but one that suddenly felt all too real. Each word, each affectionate message, tore at her like a knife. The betrayal was clear. There was no mistaking it. Her breath hitched as she let the phone fall from her hand. It slipped onto the counter, the impact barely registering as her mind spun. She was frozen, a flood of emotions crashing over her, anger, disbelief, devastation, but nothing compared to the cold fury that simmered beneath the surface. Owen had crossed a line that couldn't be undone. Lila knew in that instant that her life, her marriage, everything she had known, would never be the same. The phone lay silent on the counter as Nathan's laughter echoed in the background, the sound of innocence that only heightened the bitter reality Lila now faced. She had to act. But not yet. Not in a rush. No. This would require more than just confrontation. It would require precision. It would require a plan. The fight for her family, her future, had just begun, and Owen had no idea what was coming. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to calm the storm of emotions inside. This wasn't about a knee-jerk reaction. This was about something bigger. Much bigger. She glanced at the phone again, then back at Nathan, the little boy still playing outside. He would never know the truth of what his father had done, not yet. For now, Lila would hold her silence, but she knew the first step in her journey was just beginning. Lila stood there, staring at the phone for what felt like an eternity, her mind a whirlwind of confusion and anger. The soft glow of the screen seemed to mock her, its brightness cutting through the silence of the kitchen like a cruel reminder. She wanted to throw it, shatter it into 1,000 pieces, but instead, she turned away, her steps slow and deliberate as she walked to the window. Outside, Nathan was running in the yard, laughing as he kicked a soccer ball into the air. Her heart clenched. He had no idea. How could he? He was just a child, innocent, oblivious to the unraveling chaos around him. Lila swallowed hard, forcing herself to focus. She couldn't afford to let her emotions take over now, not when everything was at stake. She knew she needed a plan, but first, she needed time to think. The anger was there, simmering just below the surface, but it was tempered by something else, something far colder. This was betrayal, yes. But it was also an opportunity. An opportunity to reclaim control. Lila wasn't the type to be blindsided by emotions. She had been through too much in life to let a man's deceit break her. No. This wasn't the end of her. This was just the beginning. Her mind immediately shifted into action mode. There was no way Owen would be able to get away with this. No way she would allow him to continue living a double life while she stood idly by. It was time to collect evidence. It was time to take back what was hers. The next morning, Lila awoke with a sense of purpose. She moved through her morning routine with a quiet efficiency. Owen, as usual, was distant, distracted. He kissed her on the cheek as he headed out the door, muttering something about being late for a meeting. She barely registered the words. Instead, she focused on the task ahead. With Owen out of the house, the real work could begin. Lila immediately began going through his things, his office, his car, his emails. She wasn't sure what she was looking for at first, but something told her that the truth would reveal itself, just like it always did. She found more than she had expected. A hotel receipt, a few intimate messages between Owen and Jenna. They were enough to confirm her worst fears. This wasn't just a fleeting mistake, it was a full-blown affair. But that wasn't all. As she scrolled through Owen's messages, she uncovered something even more damning: financial transactions, funds transferred to a mysterious account. It was clear now, this wasn't just about love or lust. It was about money, power, and control. Owen had been siphoning off their savings, planning to leave her behind while he built a future with someone else. Lila's blood ran cold, but there was no time for panic. She had to be methodical. Each piece of evidence had to be documented, saved, and secured. She couldn't let him slip away. He had no idea that she was onto him, and she would use that to her advantage. By the time Owen returned home that evening, Lila was calm, collected. She greeted him with a smile, her voice warm and inviting. She had learned long ago that sometimes, the most dangerous thing you can do is pretend everything is fine. And tonight, that's exactly what she planned to do. She cooked dinner, served him his plate, and sat down at the table as if nothing had changed. But as she watched him eat, she couldn't help but notice the subtle signs of guilt in his eyes, the way he kept glancing at his phone, the nervous tension in his shoulders. He didn't know it yet, but she had already won. The pieces were all in place. And soon, very soon, Owen would have no choice but to face the consequences of his actions. After dinner, they sat on the couch, the TV playing softly in the background. Owen spoke about his day, rambling on about work. Lila nodded occasionally, but her mind wasn't on his words. It was on the phone sitting on the coffee table, the device that had started it all. She couldn't help but glance at it, knowing that every text, every call, every message was another nail in the coffin of their marriage. She would let him think everything was normal. For now, she would play the part of the loving wife, waiting for the right moment to strike. And when the time came, Owen would have no idea what hit him. But there was one thing Lila was certain of: this wasn't just about revenge. It was about her future. It was about reclaiming the life that had been stolen from her, and she wasn't about to let anyone, especially not Owen, stand in her way. The days that followed were a blur of calculated silence and razor-sharp focus. Lila's routine, once familiar and comforting, now felt like a well-rehearsed act. Each morning, she put on her mask, greeting Owen with the same smile, the same softness in her voice. But beneath that facade, her mind was a whirlwind of strategy. Every glance at him, every word he spoke, was another thread in a web she was meticulously weaving. The more time passed, the more Owen's arrogance grew. He had no idea that the person he had so easily betrayed was now plotting his downfall. His behavior became sloppier, more reckless. Late nights spent at the office turned into even later nights at work dinners with his colleagues, the lighter in back. His phone calls became more frequent, and his presence at home, though physical, was absent mentally. He was lost in his own world, a world where Lila no longer mattered, a world where his lies felt like a given. But she was no longer the woman who would sit quietly in the corner, pretending not to see what was happening. She was the woman who had learned how to survive, and how to make him regret every moment of his betrayal. It started with small victories, things that seemed insignificant to Owen but were monumental for Lila. She began by digging deeper into his finances, taking note of every strange transaction. The hundreds of dollars transferred here, the secretive bank withdrawals there. A hidden account. A joint credit card with mysterious charges. Lila's heart tightened with each new discovery, but instead of breaking her, it fueled her resolve. She'd always prided herself on being a fighter, but this was different. Owen had crossed a line she could never forgive, and now, she would make sure the world saw him for what he truly was. Then, one afternoon, it happened. Lila was on her way out to pick Nathan up from school when she overheard something she hadn't expected to hear, Owen's voice, low and coaxing, coming from the other side of the house. She paused, her breath catching in her throat as she recognized the name on his lips, Jenna. It was a conversation she had hoped would never happen, but now that it had, Lila knew it was her moment. She moved quietly, carefully, positioning herself just out of sight as Owen's words grew clearer. You know, I'm just counting the days. Soon, I'll be free. No more pretending. He paused, as if waiting for something. I can't wait to leave her for you. The words hit Lila like a sucker punch. Her stomach churned, the bile of betrayal rising in her throat, but she swallowed it down. There was no time for weakness. She pressed record on her phone, capturing every single word. Owen's casual dismissal of their life together, his promises of a future with Jenna, it was all there, in his own voice. This wasn't just infidelity, this was a deliberate, cold betrayal of everything they had built together. Lila took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest. This was the moment that would change everything. She had the evidence now. She had the truth in her hands, and there was no turning back. Later that evening, when Owen returned home, Lila played the part of the loving wife once more. Dinner was ready, and she greeted him with the same practiced warmth. The conversation was casual, too casual, in fact, and for a moment, Owen seemed to relax. He talked about his day, about his meetings, and the people he'd spoken to, unaware that every word he said was now nothing but noise to Lila. She was no longer listening. As the evening wore on, Lila couldn't help but watch him, this man who had broken her heart in the worst way possible. She could see the signs of his guilt, his restlessness, the way his eyes flickered to his phone whenever it buzzed. He had no idea that the storm he thought he had controlled was about to swallow him whole. After dinner, they sat on the couch, the television murmuring in the background. Owen was distracted, his attention constantly drawn back to his phone. He was so lost in his own world that he didn't notice Lila's steady gaze on him, nor the phone she had placed carefully on the coffee table. Finally, when the tension was almost unbearable, Lila spoke, her voice calm but cold. I've been thinking, Owen. He looked up at her, his brow furrowing slightly, but he said nothing. I think it's time we had a serious conversation about everything. Owen smiled awkwardly, completely unaware of the trap that had been set. What do you mean? He asked, his voice light. Lila didn't respond immediately. Instead, she slowly slid the phone across the table toward him, her fingers brushing against the edge of the screen. I think you should take a look at this, she said softly. Owen's face changed in an instant, his smile faltering as he glanced at the phone. He picked it up, but before he could react, Lila leaned forward, her words deliberate and measured. You've been busy, haven't you, Owen? Planning, lying, hiding everything from me. But here's the thing, I know everything. Owen's face paled as he stared at the screen. Lila watched him, her heart racing as she saw his world start to crumble. The moment of reckoning had arrived, and there would be no escaping it now. Every lie, every betrayal, all laid bare in front of him. I hope you've enjoyed the surprise, Lila said, her voice barely above a whisper, but the coldness in it sent a chill through the air. But here's the thing, Owen, it's over. And you have no idea just how much you've lost. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. You can't just walk away from this. Not this time. Owen was speechless, his hands shaking as he scrolled through the damning evidence. The reality was settling in, and Lila could see the panic starting to rise in his chest. For a brief moment, she almost felt sorry for him. But then she remembered everything he had done. This was his doing, and now he would face the consequences. As he sat there, fumbling with the phone, Lila stood up, her movements slow and deliberate. "I'm done, Owen. And so is this marriage." The finality in her voice left no room for negotiation, no room for excuses. The fight was over. And Lila had won. But this was just the beginning. What came next would be far more complicated, more devastating. And Owen had no idea what was coming. Owen sat frozen, the phone still clutched in his trembling hands, as the weight of Lila's words sank in. His mind raced, his thoughts colliding in a chaotic swirl. The screen of the phone showed the messages, the receipts, the undeniable proof of everything he had been doing behind her back. The affair, the lies, the manipulation, it was all there, staring him in the face. He couldn't breathe. His pulse hammered in his ears, and for the first time in what felt like years, he was utterly powerless. Lila stood, her posture straight, her eyes hard, watching him like a predator eyeing its prey. She had been waiting for this moment, preparing for it with a cold, methodical precision that now left Owen in shambles. He tried to form words, but they came out as jumbled excuses, weak pleas for mercy that only deepened Lila's resolve. "Lila, I didn't mean for this to happen," Owen stammered, his voice cracking. "I never thought it would get this far." But Lila wasn't listening. She didn't need his excuses. She had already heard them, over and over, from men like him. The lies, the promises, the empty words meant to buy time and ease the guilt. She had lived with them for far too long, but no more. "Don't try to justify it, Owen," she said coldly, her voice low but unyielding. "You've made your bed, and now you'll lie in it. I'm done pretending everything's okay when it never was. You think I didn't know? You think I couldn't feel the distance growing between us, the lies you were spinning around me? I was just waiting for you to finally show me your true face." Owen's eyes widened, guilt and fear etched across his features. "Please, Lila, don't do this. We can fix this, we can." "No," Lila cut him off sharply. "It's too late for that. There's nothing left to fix. You've taken everything, my trust, my love, my future, and thrown it all away for what? A cheap fling? You think Jenna's worth this? You think she's worth losing everything we've built together? Because let me tell you something, Owen," she leaned in, her voice growing colder with each word, "I'm done. I'm not just walking away from you, I'm walking away from this whole damn life we had. It's over. For good." Owen's face contorted in desperation, but Lila was unmoved. She had already made her decision. The floodgates had opened, and there was no turning back now. She watched as he crumbled, his arrogance from before now replaced with pure panic. He reached for her hand, his voice pleading, "Lila, please, just let me explain. We can work through this. I love you, I swear. I'll end it with her. I'll make it right. I'll do anything." Lila pulled her hand away, stepping back, her eyes never leaving his. "You don't get to say that, Owen. You've had every chance to make it right, and you chose not to. You chose her, and now you'll deal with the consequences." She could feel her pulse steady, the storm inside her subsiding as she spoke. "This isn't about us anymore. This is about me, taking back control of my life. I don't need you. I never needed you to make me whole. You've never truly seen me, Owen. But you will now." The finality in her words hung in the air like a heavy weight. She watched him recoil, his face a mix of fear, disbelief, and shame. It was clear that he didn't understand the gravity of what he had lost. He was still grasping for some kind of redemption, some way to undo the mess he had created. But Lila wasn't interested in giving him that. She wasn't here to save him. She was here to save herself. "I've already started the paperwork," Lila said, her tone clipped. "I've spoken to a lawyer, and the divorce will be filed tomorrow. I've made sure I'm covered in every way possible. You'll have no claim on anything. Not our assets, not our son. You're done. And don't think for one second that I'm going to let you use Nathan as a pawn in this. I will protect him from you, from everything you've become. You don't deserve him. Owen stumbled back, his face pale as he tried to form another plea. But Lila wasn't listening anymore. The man she once loved was no longer the person standing in front of her. What remained was a stranger, a man who had shown her nothing but deceit, and she would not be fooled again. You've already destroyed everything, Owen, Lila said quietly, her gaze unwavering. And I'm not going to sit here and watch you burn it all down. You're on your own now. As she turned to walk away, Owen called her name, his voice breaking. Lila, please, but she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. There was nothing left to say. No more tears to cry, no more apologies to accept. She had walked this path for too long, and now, it was time for a new chapter. Lila took one last look at him, her heart heavy, but her resolve stronger than ever. The man she had once known was gone. And in his place was only a lesson, one that would guide her through the years to come. She would rebuild, she would rise, and she would do it all without him. The door closed behind her with a finality that echoed through the house. And Owen was left alone, surrounded by the wreckage of his own making, his fate sealed by the choices he had made. But for Lila, this was the beginning. A new life awaited her, one that she would take back with both hands. And she wouldn't look back. Not ever again. The days after the confrontation passed in a blur, but Lila couldn't help but feel a strange sense of calm settling over her, like the quiet after a storm. The chaos in her heart had been replaced with something far more resolute, clarity. She had made the decision to walk away, to sever ties with a man who had taken her trust and trampled it underfoot. And now, with every step she took away from him, she could feel herself getting stronger, more certain of the path she had chosen. Nathan, ever the bright spark in her life, didn't understand fully yet. His innocent questions about where Daddy was and why they were no longer living together tugged at Lila's heart, but she kept her answers simple. Daddy made some mistakes, sweetie, and sometimes, grown-ups need to fix things, she'd say, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead and offering him a smile he could trust. Nathan didn't need to know the depths of the betrayal, not yet. But one thing was for sure, his future, their future, would be full of love and safety, away from the toxic shadow of Owen. In the weeks that followed, Lila threw herself into rebuilding her life. She poured her energy into her work, rediscovering her passion for graphic design. What had once been a hobby had now become the lifeline that supported her, and soon, she found herself creating designs for clients, her own little business starting to flourish. The independence that had once seemed so far out of reach now felt like a tangible, solid thing beneath her fingertips. Every project she completed, every client she satisfied, felt like another piece of her reclaiming what had been lost. She took Nathan on weekend trips to the beach, to the zoo, to the places that had once been filled with the echoes of Owen's absence. It felt good to not have to walk on eggshells, to not have to wonder what Owen was doing or who he was talking to. They were free. And in those moments, she could see the light return to Nathan's eyes, the carefree joy that had been stolen from him when the tension at home had become too much to bear. But there were still moments when the weight of everything settled in her chest, moments when the betrayal resurfaced, uninvited, like an unwelcome guest. When she checked her email or her bank account, and there were still traces of the life they had shared, his name, their joint investments, his credit card bills, Lila had to remind herself that she wasn't bound to him anymore. That life was over. And as for Owen, she heard from him sporadically. His attempts at reconciliation were pathetic, a desperate scramble to salvage what he could, to claw his way back into her good graces. His emails were full of apologies, promises, and empty words. "I've changed, Lila. I'll do anything to make it right." But she didn't need to hear it anymore. She had heard it all before. She had listened to his lies for years, and now, she was done. She forwarded his messages to her lawyer, made sure that everything he'd done, every failure, every debt, was properly documented. She wasn't just walking away from him, she was making sure that he would never have the power to hurt her or Nathan again. It wasn't until one evening, when Lila sat on the couch with Nathan curled up beside her, That she felt the full weight of what she had done, and how far she had come. The TV was on, but neither of them were watching it. Nathan had his head on her shoulder, his small hand resting in hers. They were together, and that was all that mattered. She felt a warmth flood her chest, a quiet peace that had eluded her for so long. In that moment, it wasn't about revenge or anger, it was about freedom. For the first time in a long time, Lila wasn't looking over her shoulder, wondering when the next lie would hit her. She wasn't scared of the future, of being alone, or of what Owen would do next. She was in control of her own life now, and nothing, would take that from her. As she tucked Nathan into bed that night, pressing a kiss to his forehead, she whispered words she had once thought impossible: "We're going to be okay. Better than okay. We're going to be amazing." And as she turned out the lights and stepped into the quiet of the living room, Lila finally allowed herself to feel the full weight of her own strength. She had fought for herself. She had fought for her son. And she had won. The future was waiting for them, bright and unshackled, and for the first time in a long time, Lila could breathe easy, knowing that her story was far from over. It was just beginning.